Hi, this is Joe again with another review. And for the sake of this video, I'm going to be discussing an Oscar-winning film. We just had the 2018 Oscar Awards last night, or the 90th annual Oscar Awards. So now we have officially 90 Oscar-winning films. I have reviewed in the past previous Oscar-winning films. I'm going to review one that I just saw for the first time I avoided for almost 30 years because it was one of the worst Oscar-winning films, and that is the 1989 film Driving Miss Daisy, or what I like to call it, Driving Miss Dizzy, because it's that bad of a film. Because when people do a top 10 list of Oscar-winning films, and I've done my share as well, they always put on, and they do a top 10 list of the worst Oscar-winning films. Why they put Driving Miss Daisy like near the top, or almost at the top. Crash is usually like number one worst Oscar-winning film, and Driving Miss Daisy is like usually in the top 5. So that's by most critics. And of course, I know different because I think this is one of the worst. I think people consider Driving Miss Daisy one of the worst is because of the competition. What the competition it ran against, like two huge movies that's based on a true event. One of them was Born on the 4th of July, the Tom Cruise movie, and that one won the Oscar for Best Director in Oliver Stone. It was Oliver Stone's second Oscar for Best Director, the other one being for Platoon. And that didn't win for Best Picture. It won for Best Director, but not for Best Picture. And the other movie that Driving Miss Daisy ran against was the movie Glory, which is based on the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which was the first all-black regiment that fought in the Civil War, on the American Civil War. So that was Driving Miss Daisy's competition in the year 1989, and Driving Miss Daisy beat both of them for Best Picture. Of course, this movie, I went into a long introduction here. So just to give you a little background on the competition Driving Miss Daisy had. Of course, the story Driving Miss Daisy is an Oscar staple, a type of story that will give the movie Oscars. It won at least 2 that I know of, for obviously for Best Picture, of course, and the other one being for Best Actress for Jessica Tandy. And not too long after, I think this turned out to be her last movie role, because she died like within 3 or 4 years later. She died after this role, and also starred Morgan Freeman, who was nominated for his role in this film but didn't win. And the other actor, of course, of note is Dan Aykroyd. So 1989 was a big year for Dan Aykroyd because he starred and co-wrote Ghostbusters 2, and he starred in this movie, and of course those were the 3 main characters in this film. What Driving Miss Daisy is about, basically, and also 3.5 minutes, and they even talk about the movie. The movie itself is about Jessica Tandy plays Miss Daisy, who at the beginning of the film she gets into a car accident with elderly. She was like over 70 years old at the time in the start of the movie. She gets into a car accident, and her son feels that she was no longer physically able to drive because of her age. So he hires Morgan Freeman to be her chauffeur. So for the rest of the movie, he's a chauffeur. And at first she was reluctant, so I could drive myself, or I go to the store myself and stuff like this. And she was very reluctant to have a chauffeur because she felt that, hey, I can do this myself. I don't need anybody. Well, eventually she agrees to let Morgan Freeman drive her around, and that's basically what the movie is. They develop a friendship for 25 years. Friendship. And it's a typical type of a film. And Dan Aykroyd played like a douchebag. Because Dan Aykroyd usually in his movies, from Ghostbusters to the My Girl films, he always plays like the nice guy. Maybe a little flaky, but usually a nice guy, especially the Ghostbusters films. But in this movie, he plays like a douchebag. He really plays like a douche to his mother. Of course, Jessica Tandy, or her character Daisy, is one of the few Jewish people in Georgia, and you do see a little racism, anti-Semitism in this film. One particular scene where Miss Daisy, she wanted to go to like either a cousin or a brother's birthday or something, and goes from Georgia to like Mobile, Alabama, and of course here's Morgan Freeman driving her, and so she's in the back seat, he's driving her, and when they get pulled over, they were pulled over already to have a lunch break. When the cops stop and say, "What are you doing here?" and one demand to know if he was really the driver, and Miss Daisy says to him, "Yeah, he's my driver. This is my car, but he's my driver, and here's the proof. He works for me. My son pays him. My son hired him to be my driver and all that stuff." And after they get that hassle from the cops, they pull away, and one cop says to the other, "Great, there's an old Jew and a nigger in the same car." I mean, that's asking for trouble in this state, and because the movie does take place from 1948 to 1973, so that's why I said 25-year friendship, and it's one of those types of movies that's particularly at that time that nowadays the Oscars make fun of, or Hollywood makes fun of stories like this, and won the Oscar. And I think one of the few movies that won for Best Picture they didn't win for Best Director, because usually those awards usually go hand in hand. Whoever wins for Best Director for a picture, that movie, the director won for or directed, wins for Best Picture as well. So it usually goes hand in hand, and this is one of the few times in Oscar history that both movies, that the movie that won for Best Picture did not win for Best Director. And the two movies that I mentioned as well against Driving Miss Daisy was like 10 times better than Driving Miss Daisy is, and that movie won. So I got a boatload of criticism for having to win. And that's why I avoid watching this movie for 29 years, because I felt it was that bad of a film. I'm not saying it's not a good story. I'm not saying that Jessica Tandy wasn't good in it. She was. I mean, like I said earlier, she won for Best Actress. She became the oldest actress, at the time to win for Best Picture. Not for Best Picture, for Best Actress. She was like the oldest woman to win one. And we should have had Christopher Plummer win an Oscar for his role, but it was controversy with that because he replaced Kevin Spacey in that role because he was accused of sexually harassing somebody. So he replaced Kevin Spacey with Christopher Plummer. He gets nominated. So I figured if the role is probably figured if he vote for Christopher Plummer, there'd be even bigger stink. So they decided not to give him the Oscar. But anyway, for Driving Miss Daisy, I still think it's one of the more boring films. I wouldn't say call it boring. It was entertaining enough. It was interesting enough to watch it. But it's like one of those Oscar-winning movies you just watch it once and you can immediately forget about it. Because, of course, at the end of the film, I should get back to the film. Towards the end of the movie, Jessica Tandy's character, Miss Daisy, starts to lose her mind, and her son had to, played by Dan Aykroyd, had to put her in a old folks home, and that's what happened. And of course, he sells the house, and Morgan Freeman's character decides to visit, and says to visit Miss Daisy in the old folks home, and of course Dan Aykroyd takes Morgan Freeman over, and they had a nice little visit at the end of the film, and Morgan Freeman starts feeding her whether it was pudding or Jello, whatever snack that the home gave her, and she couldn't do it herself anymore. So Morgan Freeman feeds her at the end, and that's how the movie ends. It doesn't show that the Jessica Tandy dies or Morgan Freeman or both of them died, or didn't show any of that. And this is one of the more shorter films in terms of running time than won for Best Picture. It was only like about an hour and 40 minutes long, which is, I think, was like controversial at that time because pretty much throughout the whole 1980s or decade of the 80s, the majority of the films that won for Best Picture were either two hours or longer. Like, what was it? Ordinary People was just over 2 hours, and so was Chariots of Fire, which for the next year, and so was in terms of it. I know I'm skip Gandhi was in '82, which was over 3 hours. Then you had Chariots of Fire. Chariots of Demon was almost 2.5 hours. You had Out of Africa was over 2 hours. You had Platoon, who I think was just over 2 hours, or barely over 2 hours for Platoon. You know, Last Emperor was over 2 hours. You know, Rain Man was over 2 hours. I know I'm forgetting one film, but most films during the 1980s were at least 2 hours long, and this one was, if not 3 hours long, in the case of Gandhi. And Driving Miss Daisy was just barely an hour and 40 minutes. So it's like one of the shortest films. And I mean, I thought that Casablanca was a short movie for Best Picture. It was only like an hour and 43 minutes. Driving Miss Daisy was shorter by 3 minutes than Casablanca. So I thought you had to be at least 2.5 to 3 hours to win for Best Picture. I mean, that's like what you could look at all the films in my lifetime that was over 2 hours. But I'm getting on a tangent. But Driving Miss Daisy is a watchable film. But like I said earlier, it's one of those Oscar-winning films you can just watch once, and just so you can say you watch every Oscar-winning film. That's how I feel about it. So that's my review of Driving Miss Daisy. Please click on the video. Please rate it. Feel free to comment on it. Please subscribe to my channel, and please forward this video onto your Facebook pages. You can check out all my videos not only on my YouTube channel at rowdyc.com. That's all WDY. C.com. There's a homepage of Rowdy Reviewer, Chris Lee Moore, and please check out all of his videos on his website. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.